You can absolutely conquer whatever it is you choose to confront. In this show, we talk PTG, we listen and believe, we support and empower. Whether you have experienced domestic violence personally or not, someone you know has. Your circle of family, friends, acquaintances, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will experience domestic violence at some point in their life. Physical abuse is only one of the many forms of domestic violence. Survivors also report experience of verbal, emotional, spiritual, sexual, financial, electronic, and so much more. Domestic violence does not discriminate. It can leave you traumatized and devastated, mentally, emotionally, financially. You can find yourself homeless, jobless, helpless. The list can go on. There's blankets of insecurities, triggers, doubts, and other residual effects that become hurdles that impact our life as we do our best to move on. Many people associate butterflies with a sense of freedom. We've been taught along the way to focus on the transformation that takes place inside of the cocoon. I invite you to take a moment to conceptualize all the odds the caterpillar was up against and needed to defeat in order to get to a safe place, to build its cocoon and actually experience the transformation. My name is A. Garcia. I am a mother and survivor of a double attempted homicide. Now, I'm dedicating my life to take yours to the next level by experiencing post-traumatic growth to begin a new chapter in your life. Let's get started on this journey together. Confronting Domestic Violence is a 501c3. All contributions, volunteers, and sponsorships are welcomed. It takes a community to make a difference. Nobody should suffer alone. Please scan the QR code. Garcia here, and thank you for tuning in. What we cover here is not intended to ignite any triggers. For what you want to conquer, you must confront. So, welcome to Confronting Domestic Violence. Today, I have an awesome guest that's going to share her story, her perspectives, her wounds to wisdom. Thank you so much for being here, Pip. Welcome to Confronting Domestic Violence.
Thank you so much. I feel really privileged to be able to speak to you today.
Oh my gosh, the honor is all mine. Are you kidding? I was like, I need to talk to this woman.
There is a lot to talk about.
Oh my gosh, there's so much to talk about. We had a brief conversation backstage and was like, this is too hot. Let's get in. So here we are. Anywhere you're willing to start, we can take it from there.
Yeah, I guess I'd love to be able to start right at the beginning, but just to let you know where I've ended up so that people don't feel too disheartened. I'm now actually educating our police forces in Australia about domestic violence, especially the stuff that goes online, which has been really interesting progression because I feel like I've come full circle. I was first introduced to domestic violence when I was 19 years old. So that's nearly 30 years ago, when it wasn't really a thing, especially here in Australia. It was a bit of a family matter or a private matter. And I was a police officer. So I would walk in at 19 into the homes of people, and reflectively, I'm quite privileged to be able to do that because not everybody can do that. And possibly at the worst times of their lives when they were having conflict or arguments or full-on fights. And there was a lot of abuse going on. And as you can imagine, it's quite confronting for a 19-year-old. I didn't really have a serious boyfriend. I probably hadn't had serious relationships. I didn't understand dynamics. And I really only had known my parents. And they were quite feisty at some times, but certainly not to the extent that I was seeing. And so the person that I dealt with first was a victim who had actually bashed her husband over the head with a frying pan. It's classic. Obviously, it was quite confronting in the sense of working out who was the victim and who was the offender. And that can be very difficult for a police officer who has not been privy to the history that's gone on. So from there, I went on to spend about 18 years in the police force. I became a specialist, especially in the fields of alcohol-related crime. So that had a very strong relationship with domestic violence, and so did pornography, as well as child sexual exploitation material and the gaming industry as well. So we had lots of influencing factors around the causal factor of domestic violence, which for us here in Australia, we've had a lot of royal commissions into what that is. And it is that male primacy, that misogynistic attitude that men are in charge, that they have the last word, that they can make all the decisions, and they have complete control and power over the people in their family units.
Wow, you said a lot of things in that short expert there. So in the United States, I've done a lot of research over the years, and in the United States, domestic violence is one of the most dangerous calls to respond to. Would you say that it's the same for you guys?
Oh, definitely. And it always has been. The majority of our homicides or murders for police officers have been at domestic violence because you don't know what you're walking into and what the capacity is. We're a bit luckier over here in Australia. In 1998, our Prime Minister changed the legislation around firearms. So you're not allowed to have a firearm in Australia without a license. So we had a really terrible incident here in Australia in 1996 where we had a massacre and we had a lot of people, like I think it was 18 or 28 people murdered from the access that the firearms gave the murderer. So our Prime Minister reacted and actually legislated firearms needed to be licensed and needed to be registered. So that for us was quite transformational because it reduced the amount of access that offenders had. And as you can imagine, it would also have a massive impact on domestic violence. But it was also the police turning up as well to those incidents where they were at risk if that home or that house actually had a firearm. It was easily accessible to them as well. So just that did see a bit of a downtake, but we've still seen police officers being killed at domestic violence incidents because quite often it will just be a simple report of, oh, there's two people fighting, where you actually don't know what the circumstances are until they got there.
Oh my gosh. And I actually used to sit on a citizens review board to learn about different complaints that are being put against officers. And I had the opportunity to work directly with internal affairs and actually receive like hands-on training with the police officers. And I would do ride-alongs. And there was a couple times where it was a DV situation. And because I was a civilian, not a trained officer, they were like, yeah, we're going to dispatch somebody else. And that's when I started to understand that, yeah, police officers are putting their lives at risk. Officers are putting their lives at risk in responding to these things because at the end of the day, a crime is a crime, but domestic violence is where your emotions are raging. And when your emotions are involved, your adrenaline is out there, way out there. Like I've literally read where people were able to run through a wall, like the old school commercial of the Kool-Aid man. Like their strength is impeccable because of their adrenaline from their emotions.
And I must admit, I've been on the receiving end of that a few times too. So police do get in the way when there's domestic violence or there's so much fear around what the outcome might be. I've been thrown up against door jams and tackled and pushed over and thrown over furniture. So we do experience all of that sort of stuff when you're trying to work out what the situation is. So it really is a little bit about emotional regulation and maintaining yourself when you actually turn up to do the job.
And I'm like, well, how many seconds do you have to assess the situation? 3 seconds, maybe?
Yeah, maybe 3 seconds. Yeah.
Maybe, right.
Yeah.
And have you ever walked in where two people were holding a firearm and you had to figure out which one was the actual offender?
No, I can say that, but I'm sure my colleagues have. And I think that's for them. It's whether there's a firearm or a knife. A knife is just as deadly. Having to confront that situation is not something that probably anybody has to do other than police. Then you'd be pretty unlucky if you were called into a situation like that.
So let's talk a little bit about resources for victims. I've done a lot of research and I think I have quite a bit from like each country, I believe, because I've done a lot of research. But Australia is not really known for domestic violence. It doesn't seem or appear to be a huge issue. I do know that the United Nations has come together and they are talking about corporations becoming a little more, I don't want to say a little more resourceful, providing mitigative responses and different programs. And I know that domestic violence is an issue worldwide, has definitely gone up, skyrocketed since COVID-19. But I'm seeing a lot of the United Nations coming together to talk specifically about domestic violence in the workplace. Have you had any exposure or experience in that arena?
I have, and I definitely don't think that there is any boundaries anymore between home and the workplace. I think that has definitely diminished over time. Like once upon a time, it'd be like leave it at work or leave it at home sort of stuff. But in the research that I've done and the interviews that I've had with people who go into these workplaces, we know that, especially in Australia, we've got billions of dollars being wasted every year in the workplace on misuse of resources at the workplace. So whether it's they're using phones or computers, or it's productivity time, it's sick leave, it's whatever that sort of cost is, that is being borne by the workplace. So you can imagine if you've got 50% of the population in your workplace as women, and you've got 1 in 2 women experience some form of domestic violence, it only goes to show you that nearly half, if you add the men in that as well, half of your workplace population is being incapacitated in some way because of domestic violence. And quite often, from my experience dealing with victims and having experienced it myself, it does take time to resolve conflict in your home, whether it's with your kids or whether it's with your partner. And that impacts, like if that's happening on a Sunday night and you've got to turn up to work the next day, that's productivity is down, concentration and focus. We know that 1 in 3 accidents in work cover claims have actually they've either had an argument or there's been some sort of abuse going on in the family home before that has happened. So
Okay. I'm sorry.
There.
You said something that I'm like, oh my gosh. Did you just say claims?
Insurance claims? Yeah. So workplace injury claims.
Okay. So we have OSHA. So that's a workplace safety. That's like the OSHA is the Occupational Safety and Health Organization, and they make sure that it's a safe workspace for you. And I am really trying hard to incorporate domestic violence into what is mandated already through OSHA called the Workplace Violence Policy. My research shows that more than 50% of workplace violence is domestic violence spillover. What good is a policy if there's not a program? And I've asked the questions. So if domestic violence comes into the workplace and somebody gets hurt, to include a co-worker, an innocent bystander, would that be an insurance claim that's put in? I cannot get a straight answer. I don't know. And you're saying that Australia does have that.
It's not claimable, but it's impacting on the workplace. So therefore, there may be like potentially claims around what did the workplace do to create a safer environment? How did they protect their employees? Or how is the workplace not liable? So it's that we've got workplace policies here for domestic violence, and we can make disclosures at work about DV and not be discriminated, but there is still a very big lag around what do you do for those people without infringing on the productivity of work. And sometimes, in many cases, the stuff that's going on at home is obviously might be playing out in the workplace. So it's not a fact that she's not capable or he's not based on productivity. It's more a fact that there's been an impact and there's no protective mechanisms around them. Like we have a program over here where they can get a free phone to be safe online, so they can have a phone at work, which is really good. So that works well for victims who are very controlled at home and don't have or are having their tech monitored and stuff like that. So there's lots of avenues that they've taken up here which have worked really well, so to help get the support they need and contact the people that they need to contact.
And thank you for sharing that, because based on what I'm hearing, it's like you would treat and provide the person that is trying to fight for their safety the same way that you do for those that have gambling problems, porn addictions, and alcohol addictions. There's resources for those individuals that are going to work that are dealing with their mental health at home, and they're using those outlets as escape tools that also impact their productivity and how they show up. And it's like when it is for safety, you would think that there would be more support or help. I know you said you're not discriminated against, but yeah, it definitely goes back to that actual help, the transformation and the transition from being unsafe to safe. And then what are you guys doing for those that are still working at home in that environment? Is that considered a workplace environment?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And we've seen a big transition of that. Similar, our online space is also a workplace now. So that's what I'm saying. There are no boundaries anymore about what is a workplace and what is not, which that's why workplaces have to step up and really have people that are trained or have people that can respond to some of the disclosures that might be made and do it appropriately and in a sensitive way, and so that the victim feels supported, because by that time, the walls are just broken. There is nowhere in the world that she feels safe, is what we found. And that, along with all the 30 years of media that have told us that women aren't safe anywhere, not in a car park, we're not safe in a park, we're not safe at a pub, you can't go anywhere without some sort of threat happening. Women have also got this as well, that they're not safe at home. It's hard for them to believe that there would be a safe place for them to go.
That is so true. I actually had a doctor that has written a lot of books, and she suffered a murder. Her husband was murdered, and she found out about his underground life because of his death. She had no idea about it while she was married, but that's what it took for her to discover these things. And she's been going through a lot of post-traumatic growth and seeking help to rebound from all of that. And one interesting thing that she said is, if you ask a man, when was the last time you felt threatened or afraid for your life? They will have to sit there and really think, like, when was that? And the answer is almost laughable for a woman when they hear it, because we can speak on it right away without taking a second of thought and have a whole list of when we felt unsafe or threatened.
Yeah.
And so I want to share that I did pull up an article that I had about Australia specifically, and it says that the Champions of Change Coalition says that 62% of women who experience domestic violence are in the paid workforce. Up to 78% of perpetrators carry out their abuse during working hours using the workplace resources.
Yeah, that's high.
Yeah, that is really high. And like you said, like 50% of your task or of your force, your task force, can be victims or going through something and actually need the help. And based on what you're saying, productivity going down and the attitude or the moods or whatever's happening at work, think about the people that they're sharing that with. Now they're concerned, now their productivity is going down. And if there isn't a formal program that's actually in place where if somebody is reporting something or sharing something like that, if it has anything to do with human safety, it should be reported. There should be a structure. There should be a program in place so it can be mitigated. Because really, first responders in that type of setting are your security officers, not law enforcement. They're the first responders. And most of the time, they're contracted out. So they're a third party not receiving any sort of formal training that the corporation has. They have their own. And then most of the time there's like a pool, and there's a constant change of shift and personnel and high turnover. So it's like, how do you really protect and communicate, respond and mitigate in that type of setting? And it's just, I think that some sort of legislation has to take place where corporations are mandated to have a reporting structure and resources like they do for other employees that are struggling in their lives. And how we go about that, I think it's going to be a while, but that's what these awesome nonprofits popping up left and right will make a difference is doing. And I hate to bring up the Me Too movement in a way that downplays the impact it truly has because of how quickly it fizzed out.
Yeah.
You don't hear about it anymore.
And it's interesting because I guess I'm in the space, so I do hear about it. But I guess what's happening, what I'm saying is that people are less likely to share their story because of the tone deafness that goes on, because they're not seeing the outcomes that would be appropriate happening. So for here, I don't know about you, but over here we have what they call the slow moving beast. And it's the oh, we're promising change, but that's not coming in for another 2 years. And you think, what happens? How is that going to inspire people to come forward? So we've seen a massive uptake of reporting in domestic violence, but the response is still the same. So people are disillusioned by the response because they're not getting the outcomes that they want. And I guess the problem is the structure that was set up by men for men many years ago needs to be transformed into a space where not everybody wants to go down the legislative process. Some women just want it to stop. So how do we do that effectively? So that is a measured outcome. We've got intervention orders over here, which are very effective, but you still have to go to a courthouse. Otherwise, you go to a lawyer and you send a letter, which really, in the court system, then doesn't have any power to say, I've told him to stop. So you've got these, you can give notice of intention to separate. I'm not happy with your behaviour. This behaviour needs to stop, otherwise I am leaving. But then that will immediately trigger off family court proceedings. Again, they're in another system. We've got child protection systems, we've got civil protection, and we've got the police, and they are the systems that exist for fairness, but they are definitely not effective in the family violence space. And I'm really lucky that I did a lot of studies around our family court about 20 years ago, just before they changed. And what we have now is nowhere near what the intention was when our family court was set up in 1975. It's just gone completely off whack, and it's trying to bring in relationships between two warring parents or two partners who are no longer getting along, and that is the focus rather than the actual children and their safety. So we have lots of flaws going on, and it's one of those things where you go, if we had a big piece of land where we could build a new arena, I think we would do much better building it rather than trying to fix it.
I agree. Yeah, we have the slow moving beast over here too, which is why I think people try to just make a difference independently opposed to waiting and going that route for sure. And the other thing too, since COVID-19 is resources have become a bit more scarce because so much funding went to COVID-19, everything. And is there the space to provide safety? Are those programs still in existence? Because what was there 2 years ago may not be there today. And it becomes this domino effect of this phone call, and you make this phone call and they give you another phone number, and then you call that number and they just give you another number, and it becomes this like referral, but you spend days and weeks, months, sometimes calling and not getting what you need. And by the time you finally do reach somebody, your circumstances had changed. So your needs are now different. And it's like, I'm looking at how to like actually have a full on transitional, like second chance opportunity for folks. The mission of Confronting Domestic Violence is relocating real-time victims and their children to a safe space if they don't have the means to get there, but at least have a space to go to. And that doesn't mean that they're not going to return, because that's sometimes the cycle. But I would like to partner with folks and have different type of interventions, different type of counseling, different types of coaching that's available to prevent that, because that is a vicious cycle. And what you said earlier about the gun law, guns don't kill people, people kill people. And same thing with misogyny, same thing with hatred, same thing with all of that, that authoritative thought process of feeling superior. It is generational. It has been condoned. It has been okay. In the early 1900s, 1920, this was when it was first being brought up. It wasn't until the 60s and 70s that it actually became like a human rights issue. And it hasn't been that impactful since then. And yet we're still dealing with it on such high levels in all areas.
Yeah. And a lot of it now it's not overt, it's the covert misogyny. That's just the way it is belief. It's the way that we try to challenge it. So I'm very big on words and language and trying to help women understand that's just what it is. And they'll go, no, that's not what it is. This is exactly what's holding you back. And if you could see your life through my eyes and the potential that you have, you would be better off. But it's like you said, it's very difficult for them to see themselves as anything but they are now. I think coaching is probably a transformational place that people need to go, because the trauma counselling, it's great to really work out what those patterns are and understand what abuse looks like and what it feels like. But I think most of us know that it's uncomfortable. It's just that we've allowed our tolerance levels to be raised. Every time it happens, we go, oh, and that reinforces that behavior is okay. So I talk about these thresholds all the time with women who are victims of domestic violence. I go, would you allow your friend to tolerate that? Would you tolerate that if that was happening to your friend? No, you wouldn't. But why are you doing it? And we know that it's complex. We know there's children, there's money. But I think pushing women into financial independence education, understanding that they have legislative rights around their children, being the good parent, and just regulating themselves first is the steps to that growth period where they get to go in and then design the life they had. Because even myself, I fell into the default of this is just how it is with parenting. I am the default parent as a mum. I'm the one that knows where the socks are. I'm the one that knows where the sticky tape is. And you end up just doing it because it's easier. And I call it weaponized incompetence by men. They pick and choose what they want to do. And it's not that's a bad thing. Like, I was happy to help out my family, but it's only when you really realize how much time you spent doing that and the cost that it's been to the life that you really wanted to have. And I don't think many of us, and not many of my friends, sit back and think, what was I dreaming of when I was 23? Am I living the life that I was supposed to be living at 23? And you think you are, but you don't. It's so slow and it's so coercive that you end up just finding yourself in this mess, and then trying to get out of it is like trying to pull spaghetti apart from a bowl. You literally have to pull one strand at a time and go, oh, that's not what I want. That's not what I want. I don't want that. And then you end up being a completely different person who is probably not compatible with the partner that you're with.
That's right. And that self-regulation, I think that emotional intelligence and domestic violence should be a part of the school's curriculum starting in junior high when they're talking about sex ed and the anatomy of your body and puberty and all that other kind of stuff, because during that time, your hormones are out of control. Your understanding is gone because your brain has already separated. And it's like you're just exerting and or having these outbursts, not even understanding why, because there's so much confusion behind who you're becoming during those puberty stages. And if it's not checked, if it is tolerated, if it is condoned during those dating years of, what I still call adolescence, teenage, young adults, that's how I believe it's like a snowball effect. It just continues to escalate until it gets to a point where the woman is, or the man is, completely broken down, has totally lost themselves, because what you said earlier, it became like this covert thing. And
it is very
unknowing.
covert.
I'm sorry?
Some of it is, it's so covert that it's just a level of acceptance, because it's this, what they call that cognitive dissonance, where it goes, it doesn't feel right and it doesn't look right, but that's just, it's not causing any chaos. So I think that, especially for domestic violence, we're expecting people to wait until it explodes, where they're waiting till it's so chaotic, when really that's not when you should be leaving. It should be in the space where it is calm and, you know what, this is not how I want to live my life anymore. This is not the relationship that I want anymore. That's when you should be able to leave. And I think that the explosions that we see on the TV, the violence that we see, is just being replicated because that's what women are waiting for until they can leave. It gives them an excuse to leave. And probably men as well. It's that excuse, but whereas I know my tolerance is cheating is a thing. I go, betrayal trauma is a real thing for women. And I don't think that many of us come back from it. And I'm sure I've spoken to men who don't deal with it very well as well. But men and women think differently about sex. And when you were talking about that through adolescence, I think, where did we learn to have sex as adolescents?
A friend?
And I'm going, where do men go to porn? That's what so it's unrealistic. And then we're learning off the men as that relationship evolves. And if you've got somebody who is fixated on the sex or is diving deep into porn, it's like they're going to come out with a completely different expectation and experience, which then sets them up for relationships. So you know that when you're 19 and 20 and you're still finding yourself, you're going, oh, this is different. Oh, this is a different relationship. And you're not sure which one you should be looking for.
Yeah. And emotions. As soon as you feel these butterflies and you're like, oh my gosh, he likes me, I think I'm falling in love. It's the first feeling of that, and you want it so bad because it's an idea that you have in your head, but you don't understand or really realize all the things that come with it. And when you are blinded by love, your logic is gone. And so when
Yeah.
you're saying to, somebody, would you let your friend go through that? But that person may not even realize that they lost themselves and that their boundaries are gone, unless, like you said, it got to the point where they're doubting who they are as a person, or something explodes to the point where they have no choice but to leave. So yeah, how can we bring knowledge and understanding so that they can intercept it before it gets to that point, and have
Yeah.
the courage and confidence within themselves? Because after going through such devastation, that, that emotional trauma, it's like trusting again. How do you trust
Mm-hmm.
again? And based on my personal research and the coaching that I've gone through, Be Your Incredible Self is a great coaching platform, by the way. But just being able to really identify that the trust that has to come from within really needs to be trusting yourself in order to see what somebody is about, or the red flags, or understand, hey, that's a lie and I'm not going to tolerate that. It's not
Yeah.
so much about trusting somebody else, it's trusting yourself around other people, or letting those people around, you, whichever direction it's going.
I agree with you 100%. I think that was my biggest lesson. I hit my 40s and I worked out that I was feeling, again, I'd been through PTSD and I'd done the recovery work, but trusting yourself is probably one of the hardest things. And also then having the confidence to trust others and just deal, and have the confidence to be able to deal with other people when they let you down, or when they disappoint you, or when they shock you, or whatever it is. Because I think that's where we become so protective of ourselves, going, I don't want to go through that again, so I'll just push everybody away. Anger was my best friend for a very long time, and it worked well. It saved me in a lot of spaces, but it was also quite destructive, because you become angry at yourself. You don't like yourself. You don't like who you are. But I think for me, I wanted to share with you that one of the realizations I came through when I went through my coaching with my coach about where my life wanted to be, was that I didn't really, I guess when I was younger, I liked people because they liked me. And I felt I was brought up to feel lucky if somebody chose to be with me. And when you get into those relationships where you're only going out with them because they like you, and not really reflective and going, do I like this person? Do they align with my values? Do I really want to be here? I bent out of shape to make it work. Mm-hmm. And that's where I lost myself. In my late 20s, I went, I have to be somebody else in order to be with this person. And it wasn't that I was lacking in confidence or an ability to make a decision. Here I was making life and death decisions in the police. But I think it just, as a young girl, you're not given those skills to go, who do I really want to be with? So I'm envious of these young girls now. They're just like, no, I don't think so. No, go away. You don't meet the criteria.
I hear you on that one. I'm like, wow, look at these youngins. Yeah, and I am so proud that they have the voice and the confidence, because it was definitely not taught to us. Our generation was more, you made your bed, you lie in it, you make your decisions, you suffer the consequences, figure it out. Mental health was not a thing. The internet was not around. Finding actual resources was like a good luck, a needle in a haystack. Friends were really all that there was to turn to, and what good can a friend do other than listen when you're so young and you don't have the resources, or know, and or are ashamed. There's so many people that don't even share it because of that too. It's just this stigma that has been around for so long. And my whole thing about changing the paradigm and bringing post-traumatic growth to the forefront and the attention of folks is because these things are not taught enough. The word confront does not mean let's get combative. The word confront means that you care about something enough that you're seeking resolution, and you want all parties to come together to do that. And hence confronting domestic violence. We want to make a change. And it just gets to this difficult space when you realize that there's as many people that are against it as many people as condone it. And it's so disheartening, because it's like, what do you do when it's that even match? And even though they say, oh, there's so many more women than men, 7-1, is so what? The statistics are 1 out of 3 women, regardless. Yeah. So what do you do with that? It's 1 out of 3 is a lot. What are we not doing? And how are we not stopping it before it happens. And it's not that we as outsiders can do anything for somebody else, but for the other person to see it before it becomes too late, because domestic violence is a slow motion to death.
It's a pathway.
Yes.
And it keeps you on a figure-8 cycle that just keeps propelling you in and out and in and out. And I just think if people can see that pattern in their relationships, whether it's with, like I said, children or parents or siblings or their partner, you've just got to be able to manage. If you can manage yourself and stay safe, then that's okay. I think that's where the greatest growth comes, is that when you work out that everything is your fault and everything is your problem and everything is your responsibility, and you can't change everybody else, then that piece of growth is like, they start to fade away, and the impact that they have on you is a lot different. I can manage my sister for about an hour and a half before she starts to grate on me. And I love her. She's funny as all hell. We've been together for 45 years. But you just go, I can only go there so long. Because she knows she can pick on me. But it's no longer it's not that intimate, but she knows a lot of details about me. So she knows where to hurt me. And while I take it with a grain of salt, but it's the same with a partner. They know what they can do and the capacity. And I think women need to realize that every time there's a threshold that's lifted, they do something a little bit more. Like, even if it was just he sent a text message to a girl, the next time he knows that you can tolerate that, it'll be, I'm going to just go and meet her out for a drink.
That's right.
And then it keeps going up. If they don't get it, they can't pull back, because it's just a lack of respect. They haven't got the respect to go, actually, I want to be with this other person. And that's that. I've done a lot of work around betrayal trauma, mainly because that's one of the issues that I would confront in a police capacity, which I could not support. I said, I can't do anything about him cheating on you. I can't do anything about his parenting, and I can't do anything about your finances. But I know that's the reason that I'm here today, is because that's why you're fighting. That's why you're arguing. But I'm here to stop the violence.
That's right.
And that's where you talk about when we refer them out to services, and even in my role now, finding the right service for the issues. The problem is there's so many issues, and they're all intertwined and complex, that they need like a whole team.
Yes.
And that's not feasible, and it's not possible to be able to approach all the issues at the one time. So yeah, really prioritizing what those issues are, what the concerns are, and what the impact has been will help people identify for themselves what they need. And I don't think when police ask, what can we do about it, or what do you want us to do about it, that's a problem. The victims don't know.
They don't. Absolutely not.
They don't know.
And you said a couple things earlier, too, where, when you start isolating yourself, that right there is a flag. Because if your world is caving in and you're no longer being social, you're no longer seeing family or friends, or even feeling like your happy, joyful self, you're in a situation, period.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things too. And then also, like, for me personally, I went through extreme independence. I didn't want to rely on anybody. It was me. I had to do it. Like you were saying earlier, it's like enabling, right? But those are natural trauma-driven responses. And we don't realize that it's also self-sabotaging.
Yeah.
And what you also brought up as it relates to that, what can we do, and what those longer term effects are that carry on, because when you're in a situation for so long, your brain has been trained in this negative demeanor. And yes, it does take a team. And if somebody can be trained or coached well enough to be committed to actually going through a transformation, it is consistency across the board. And the only person you have control over is yourself. So if you really want it, and you have somebody that has the tools and they're teaching you the techniques, how to apply those tools, you have to do it. You have to do it. Just like if you had to be the one to pack your stuff and go, you have to be the one to confront yourself in the mirror, talk to yourself like you would talk to your best friend, harsh, with love, embracing, non-biased, supportive, and then apply what you need to apply, because to retrain your brain, you have to be consistent. It takes 6 to 12 months to break a bad habit. It only takes 21 to 28 days to create a new one. So if you start creating that new one, by default, it will replace the negative. And there you start on your post-traumatic growth. Because I have this saying, I have a couple sayings, but if you don't know who you are after the trauma, that's totally fine. I know you know who you're not.
And if you just create your boundaries around that, who you're not, you're already at a good start.
Yep.
And don't bend them, because once you bend those boundaries, you're responsible to what happens from there. Because it goes back to the respect, like you said. You don't have to accept it, but you better respect it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's great because I love that introduction, because that's exactly what I did. So in 2017, I actually moved to New York for a month, 28 days. I went there to change my behavior and find out who I was without my ex-husband, because I just didn't like the life that I was living. I had a perfect life, 4-bedroom home, pool in the backyard, 2 dogs, 4 children. But I was so unhappy and I was so miserable. And I went over to New York and I spent every day doing something that I like to do. And I forgot that I'd actually like doing that. Like you start to, what did I like to do? I like to go to museums and I like to go to Broadway. And so I just took my 3 children with me, because I obviously still mumming around at that time. And it was brilliant. And I came back and I asked for a divorce, because after 28 days, I had worked out who I was without this codependency of thinking that I had to make my life around him and around what we had created, which it really had and I say to him, it had nothing to do with you. It wasn't about you. It was just about me. It wasn't the life that I wanted. And that's why I was so miserable. And hopefully there was a lot of after that. But that's when you separate that and go, it's not whatever he did to piss me off or make me angry or whatever. It really had nothing to do with him. It could have been anybody, but he was just the closest source.
And so how did your kids respond to that? Were they supportive?
Oh, very, because I think that they saw a different version of me. So and that's where I do some work around all the versions of me in the past have created the person I am today, but I've had to work really hard to uncover them and unlayer them. And from what I've been able to create and the opportunities that I have found since just following what I love to do or following what I was interested in, rather than being impacted by what I thought other people wanted me to do and be, has been it's been transformational for me. And that's where I found the growth in terms of the trauma. The trauma was meant to come because it was like shaking the snow globe and waiting for it all to settle. And then that's when I really worked out. And I invented my new boyfriend is called Jed. It's somebody I don't have to justify, explain, or defend myself to. And when I put that criteria up against a man, I just go, yeah, sorry, you're either not going to, I'm like the 23-year-old now. No, sorry, not enough. No, too much.
That's right. Oh my goodness. You are a definition of post-traumatic growth for sure. Just everything you've been through, exposed to, and what you're doing and how much you're helping the community and giving back. That's so beautiful. And if you want to share anything from the people that you help or your own personal wounds of wisdom, I am happy to have our listeners hear that, because this has been such a profound conversation. I feel like we could talk for 3 more hours.
Yes, there is. What would I say?
Here, how about are you familiar with any resources that people can go to right now in Australia? If we have listeners in Australia that are going through something, do you have a hotline? Do you have an organization or anywhere that they can access?
Yeah, so we've got our 1-800-RESPECT number, which just transforms into the numbers that are on the phone for respect. But we've also got a number of NGOs, so our charities and organisations that they can find just by Googling. It's just TV services in Australia. And we've also got our sexual hotline as well, a sexual assault hotline as well, which is Full Stop Australia. And I think they're probably the 3 main ones. We've got a men's line or a men's referral centre as well. So we do cater for a lot of the stuff that goes on in the community as well as in the homes. But again, what I'd love to see is a new system that is brought in where people aren't struggling and aren't waiting to get the support that they need. And I think you guys have got some great telehealth resources over there that we would love to see here in Australia.
Yeah, I think we need to share notes on both sides and combine forces, to be honest.
Yeah, and just we're over here, we've only got 7 states. In every state it's a little bit different. So I'd like to see more of a national approach to communities and family and child protection. I think that is just imperative to make sure that the education is there, the interventions are there, and the recovery. We've just had our national plan for domestic violence come out, and it really focuses on the recovery and healing, which I think will stop people from staying in the trauma. Like, it'll really open up those opportunities to really focus on what they want to become and what they want to make the rest of their life like. We've even got a brand new hospital down in the South Coast, Borough Health, and it's a post-traumatic stress clinic for women who have gone through DV. And that's how specialised it is.
Wow, I love to hear that. I love to hear that there are these resources and communities, buildings, and people that's available. We definitely need to combine forces.
Yeah.
There's always room for growth and a need for more, that's for sure. And it's sad, but it is true.
Yeah. And I guess for my words of wisdom, I've just thought about that, and I just choose now to be happy. I think I'm a bit like Larry, happy as Larry, whatever the weather, whatever the circumstances, you've just got to work out whether or not it's for you. And I'm a big believer in time. I think that the world and the universe do deliver what you can handle, but they also deliver lots of opportunities that we are often blind to because we're so consumed by the trauma. And being able to have that skill to flip it around is incredible.
And that's one thing I was going to say is that you just hit it on the head again, where when you're in the trauma, you don't know where to go, where to seek. And if you speak out and share, call somebody that you trust, talk to somebody that you know you can confide in, have them, an outsider, try to help and get the resources, because you're so devastated. It's like you're just mechanical. You're moving on, but you're not moving forward. You're just going. It's mechanical. And it's really important to speak up and speak out, because a closed mouth doesn't get fed. And so many people have been through a form of domestic violence that as soon as we hear somebody is going through it, we automatically want to help. It's like instinctive.
Yeah, it is. It's like a hidden language that we just know what they're going through. You don't even have to describe it. We know. And I think that's really important, that people and get a strategy. Like, defendants, especially offenders, have always given a strategy to get out of being accused of something. And I think victims actually need to look at it as, I need a strategy to minimize the harm for this, or to protect my children. That is literally what it is a strategy to build your confidence, build your boundaries, and maintain them, and find the people that will support those. Because having someone tell you that, oh, that's just the way it is, I think can be the most devastating piece of advice that anybody can give. And I think that's the most common piece of advice I've ever heard is, what are you going to do about it? It's just the way it is. And you sort of sit there and you go, I'm a change maker. No, I literally, it is my whole job in life is to create change, to make it better. So don't tell me a no, because now I'm going to go and find a way to do it.
That's right. See, that's that strong mindset of a woman. Let our listeners know where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me at piprae.com. It's PIPRAE. And I've got some great words of wisdom there, especially around that emotional regulation stuff. But also I have an investigations page as well to help women strategize their exit, or certainly work out the systems here in Australia, called Upstream Investigations. And it comes from the Dennis, I think, what's his name, Tutu philosopher, who said that we need to go upstream and stop them from falling in, instead of fishing them out at the end of the river. So it's very much about finding those preventative strategies for women and just building their confidence to say, I'm not going to tolerate this, before it gets to a point that needs intervention from police or the courts. I'd like to see less numbers on the stat sheet.
Yes, we all do. And we support that cause for sure. And thank you so much for being on this show. We're going to have your link down at the bottom in caption for everybody. And I just want to say thank you so much for being here, being open, sharing, and giving back, making a difference.
Thank you. And thank you for all the work you're doing as well. We can't get enough of it.
What is the name of that national policy that you said?
It's the National Plan to End Violence Against Women.
National Plan. Okay.
We've got one for National Plan to End Sexual Violence, as well as child abuse. So there's 3 plans that they brought out for the next 10 years.
I love it.
Confronting Domestic Violence is a 501c3. All contributions, volunteers, and sponsorships are welcomed. It takes a community to make a difference. Nobody should suffer alone. Please scan the QR code.